I'm Bob Dorf, a gringo who has spent more time this year in Latin America than in his home country, the United States. I'm pleased to be reaching out to you during this our week of the year, Global Entrepreneur Week, and to be doing it from home, from Stamford, Connecticut, about an hour from New York City. I'm actually in a historic building here in Stamford, a small, city of about 100,000. It's the Stamford Innovation Center, and that picture you see behind me is about a 100-year-old mural. This is the first city hall in this city, now filled with entrepreneurs. And pardon me, I want to try tonight to give you a bit of an introduction, a very brief introduction to me, and more of an introduction and a way to think about lean, and just a few of the basic principles. And then fairly shortly after that, with help from Felipe, we're going to mostly talk about what you want to talk about, and you'll submit questions, and I will do my best along the way to answer them. Briefly, Bob Dorf has spent 45 years doing startups, so I think that means, with probably almost zero exceptions, I've been doing startups since before anybody on this hangout was actually born. The most important thing about that is not the 2 big successes I had out of my 7 startups, but the 3 total disasters. And I went on from the 7th most successful startup to then invest as an angel in 27 more, 6 IPOs, 7 more total disasters. The disasters are so important is that's how you really learn how to build a startup. You don't learn about how to build a startup by reading the book Steve Blank and I wrote, the Startup Owner's Manual. You don't learn about building a startup from a professor or an author. You learn about it by getting out there and figuring it out and getting your head kicked in over and over again. And our sort of favorite joke about the Startup Owner's Manual, which is really the heart of the lean startup methodology, is that between the covers of that 600-page book are 500 stupid startup mistakes, almost every one of them made personally by either Steve Blank, Bob Dorf, or in many cases by both of us. And some of them are excruciatingly painful. Others are just a lot more fun to read about than they are to actually commit or make the mistake. This year, I've probably spent more time in Latin America than at home, mostly as the leader of the major nationwide program in Mexico called Lean Startups MX, where we took 30 startup teams through this process over a 10-week. By the end of the 10 weeks, 7 or 8 of them had real customer revenue, and within 2 weeks of completing, 7 or 8 of them actually had either offers or funding in negotiation. And it's got nothing to do with me. It's really success in startups starts with brutally hard work. And the teams that did the best in Lean Startups MX are the same as the teams that do the best in Chile or in Colombia, where I've taught similar programs before, or in Silicon Valley. Because the #1 ingredient in startup success is a truly unique, different idea. And the #2 ingredient is the drive and dedication and passion of the entrepreneurs. And without either of those, you really shouldn't even bother. Because if you look at the statistics about startup life expectancy are really, really ugly. right? If you are trying to build a scalable startup, like an Arch Daily, a company I've had a great pleasure working with over about 12 weeks through my work at Columbia Business School, where David Essayel and his partner David basically eat, sleep, and work. And they've been doing that for 7 years, and the company is incredibly successful and growing like incredibly fast, but that's all they know how to do. They want to make sure that they drive that company to greater and greater success. And that's what startups are all about. So let's talk about the methodology that helps you get there, right? Customer development, really developed in year 2001 by Steve Blank over about a 2 or 3 year period, is the heart of what is more commonly today called the lean startup methodology. If there's a difference, and there really is no difference, it's the most critical addition to the methodology that Eric Ries added when he was implementing the methodology in a company funded by Steve, who funded the company basically to see if this method he conceived actually worked in the real world. And Eric, who comes from an engineering background, as opposed to Steve and myself, who come from the sales and marketing side of the world, Eric pointed out quite appropriately that if you are doing customer development with the dedication and energy it requires, you must couple it with agile product or software development. Because if your product can't change to respond on a quick, agile, inexpensive basis, if you can't change the product with agility to respond to what you're learning from your customers, why bother doing all that hard customer discovery work at all? And so the way I like to think about this methodology is there's a foundation to it, and then 3 principal steps that get you started. The foundation, which I won't spend too much time on, is the business model canvas, right? The way we built startups as recently as the late 1990s was step 1 was to lock yourself in a room and write a 50 or 60 page business plan and make up a whole bunch of numbers that looked like this business was going to grow amazingly fast in a very short period of time, so that you could show that to investors and hope that investors would reward you with an investment and you'd be able to start working on your business. In 1999, when the bubble sort of collapsed and it was like World War III for startups, all of a sudden investors said, gee, maybe these plans aren't so helpful after all, since most of what's in a business plan is totally fairy tales, right? We're going to hire this many people, the product's going to do this, the customer's going to do that, they're going to pay this, they're going to buy it here or there or whatever. So why waste all that time, 8, 10, 12 weeks, writing a bunch of fairy tales when investors since the year 2000 want to see proof, they want to see results, they want to see traction. They don't want to just see beautiful spreadsheets. They want to see historical spreadsheets that show growth, show traction, not necessarily show profitability. And so Swiss PhD Alex Osterwalder developed for large corporations a way to think about innovation called the business model canvas. And Steve Blank and I saw it, fell in love with it, made some rather dramatic changes to it for use in startups, and have used it as the foundation. And very simply, it's a single sheet of paper you develop in a day or 2 or 3, rather than 8 or 10 or 12 weeks to write the same thing in a business plan. And you use that as the starting point because today's startup founder acknowledges that he or she is not an absolute genius, and that the idea that the startup has developed is likely to change again and again and again before it becomes a successful business. So why waste 50 pages of paper and hours of work writing this work of fiction about how successful your business is going to be, when if you're honest with yourself and you're honest with your investors, you don't really know exactly what's going to happen the day after you start your business. Which leads us to sort of the first principle of lean startup or customer development, and that is that startups have no history, they have no facts, they don't have any customers, they don't have a product. Because they don't have a product, they really don't have competitors. And the startup begins its life in search mode, in a mode where it's out testing every element of its business to see if it makes sense or not, to see if those elements work together. And all of those elements are defined on this single sheet, the business model canvas. And the way you develop the tests is to go almost box by box through the canvas. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the box in the heart of it is the value proposition. Said simply, what is somebody going to give me money for, and why are they going to give the money to me instead of to my competitors? And what are the features and advantages and benefits of my product? The second most important box is the customer segment. Who exactly is the person that's going to give me that money, right? It's not men 18 to 34, way too big an audience. In fact, we encourage people when they start this process to think about who are the 20 people on the planet most likely to give me money for my product, and to define them as narrowly as possible and to actually go out and try to find some of them. Because if you can't get 20 people excited about your idea, how will you ever get 20,000 or 20 million excited? And those first 20 will become almost your advisory board, giving you feedback on the pricing, on the distribution, on the features, the functionality, the UI, all of the things that sure you can shape them by reading about them in a textbook or reading about them online, but it's so much more powerful to let your customer guide you in answering all of those questions as you go on this search for how I make this great idea of mine into a business. So it starts with the canvas, and then it takes a very critical step that most entrepreneurs love to skip, because you're not selling anything. In fact, you're not even talking about your business or your product at all. And we recommend that you have this kind of conversation 40 or 50 times before you even do anything, before you decide exactly what your product is, before you even finish your business model canvas. And this is what we call problem discovery, the very first step in the customer discovery process. Most businesses succeed because they solve a serious problem that's painful, that's expensive, that people have over and over and over again, right? Because people are willing to pay to solve that problem, to get that monkey off their back. And so step one, problem discovery, involves going out and talking to people whom you think are your likely customers, and talking to them not about your product, not about your business, but about this problem you're going into business to solve. So I'm going into business to improve accounts receivable management for small businesses. So I don't go in and say, hey, here's my solution, what do you think? I go in and I start to talk about, how serious a problem is this for you? Well, if we don't collect our receivables, we go out of business. So it's very high on our list. How often does the CEO worry about it? Well, he comes by my office every single morning to ask me how much I brought in yesterday. How much do you worry about it? Well, I wake up in the middle of the night, any night when I'm behind, worried about how I'm going to catch up, because otherwise I could lose my job when that CEO comes into my office. And so business-to-business products are almost always sold because they solve a real, painful, expensive problem. Or some consumer products solve problems as well, but others fill a need. It could be a need for a way to share pictures of your dog and your baby with your friends, a la Facebook, or a need to save money on your restaurant purchases, a la Groupon. But it's got to be a serious enough need for the customer to be interested in spending time or money with you and your business to solve that problem or fill that need. And so you go out and you only talk to people about the need or the problem and see where it fits on their list. And then you start to ask them, well, this is a serious problem for you. How do you solve it today? And if they tell you about made-up solutions with Post-it notes and Excel spreadsheets and paper calendars on the wall, you could start to be confident that maybe there's a technological new business opportunity there for your company to solve. If the people say it's not a problem at all, don't give up. See if maybe you're making the right pitch to the wrong customer. Maybe it's not the chief financial officer who worries about accounts receivable in a small company. Maybe it's the accounting clerk or the controller, or maybe the chief executive, if it's a small enough company, worries about it herself. But understanding that match between the customer and the value proposition is the most critical foundational step for any startup. It's called, many of you have probably heard of product market fit. Finding that match between the product and the person who has this problem so bad they'll pay almost anything to solve the problem. Once you've identified a serious problem, the chances are overwhelming that somebody's solved this problem before you, or launching a company to solve the problem already, or the company already exists. And so step 2 in customer discovery is fundamentally competitive analysis, done through the eyes of the customer. Become your own customer. Go searching for the solution that you are going to invent, knowing that your invention isn't out there yet. But pose as different types of customer, as the CEO, as the clerk, as the controller, as the CFO, and ask questions the way they would ask the questions in Google. Go to Amazon, go to eBay, go to blogs, go to websites, go to retail stores, and see how people find the solutions that exist today. And then come back to your office and think about how your solution is going to stand out from all of those existing alternatives. Because if you can't find a way to stand out, it's almost impossible to believe that your business can eventually be successful. If you're doing a smartphone app for accounts receivable, There are 1.5 million apps at iTunes and even more at the App Store today. How is anybody ever on earth going to find you? And if you're selling it for, say, $20 are you going to be able to find a customer for less than $20 when you're dealing with the small business jungle or the consumer market jungle? These things don't happen magically, and if you're in the app business, being in the App Store is a tiny step along the road to building a very successful business. Once you've started to figure those two things out, or three things, what am I selling, who am I selling it to, and what are they going to compare me to, and how will I stand out and win in that comparison, only then do you go back out a second time and talk to more customers now about your solution. Hey, we have this really cool piece of software that makes your customers rush to pay your bills. In fact, they pay your bills before you ship them the product. It's so good. Let me show it to you. And get their reaction. And get their reaction wherever you can in a sort of comparative way. Well, how do you like this compared to the Intuit product, or the Microsoft product, or this, or Oracle's product? What do you see about Oracle that you like better than this? What do you like about Intuit that you don't see here? Get continuous feedback from the only people whose opinions about your business really matter, your customers, right? Your professors, your incubator managers, the famous authors that write about this stuff, our opinions don't matter. The only opinions that matter are the opinions of people who are going to give you money. So you want to get in their face as early as you can, as quickly as you can, as often as you can, and use them as your sort of data set or your focus group to really get an understanding of what they don't like, what they do like at every step of the way. And the same way you test the products and its features, you go out again and you test where you're going to sell it, what sales channels would they want to see it in, where are you going to market it? Are AdWords going to work for you, or do you need to use publicity, journalism, articles, or billboards on the side of the road, or is it the kind of product that they're only going to buy based on the recommendation of a good friend or a trusted user who's already happy and satisfied with your product, in which case you would need to launch a very aggressive recommend a friend program or an incentive program to get people to even pay people to refer you to other customers. So those are, I mean, I can talk about this till 4 o'clock in the morning, or sort of bring this a little bit to a close and talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. But if you go back to the objective, right? Your objective is not to get a little bit of sales excitement so that you can get an investor. Your objective is to build a company that dances to these 3 magic words: repeatable, scalable, and profitable. Right? Repeatable means that when I show it to 20 people and 2 people buy it, the next time I show it to 20 people, 2 people or more buy it. In other words, I can do this again and again. I don't run out of customers quickly. Lots of entrepreneurs die because they make their first 10 sales to friends, co-workers, former co-workers, family members. They call in every favor they can to get their first 10 customers. Now they have a little bit of revenue, maybe they even have a little bit of investment, but they're out of friends, they're out of customers, and they haven't found who the customer is that's repeatable. And getting to this long before you're ready to launch your product is the other sort of element of the magic of this methodology. In other words, you're doing all this testing in parallel while you're developing the product or service, so that as I learn, I feed my learning back into the product. I change the product, I change the marketing, I change the pricing, I change the UI, the UX, so that when the product is complete, I've also tested the marketing, the distribution, the media messages and things like that. And so that when I'm ready to launch, I already know who to launch to, what to say to them, where to say it, how to get their attention. And so simultaneous with code complete is launch plan, not just written down, but tested and proven in small batches to make sure that it actually works. Because the day you launch your product is the riskiest single day in the life of your startup. Because if you don't get that launch absolutely right, and get some real momentum right out of the launch gate, the next thing that will happen is you will sit by as some investor abuses the hell out of you because you're desperate for cash to stay alive. And when you're desperate for cash to stay alive, you get to meet what is called in the US slang, the cram down. If they know how desperate you are, they get an awful lot more stock for less money, and that stock comes out of the wallets of you and your co-founders. And so the more you can test these things so you know how to spend your money wisely, how to get the results most efficiently, the lower the risk of the cram down. Because in the middle of all the excitement about startups in Chile, throughout Latin America, and literally all over the world, everybody loves to forget how few really great startups make it to, IPO, to a significant financial exit. And the best sort of number out there suggests that for companies reaching a valuation of 100 million US dollars, on a good day, that's 2 out of 1,000. So that's 1/5 of 1%, right, of the startups ever get that rocket to the moon life experience, and fewer than 10% of them live more than 2 or 3 years. And so you want to build a company for the long term, thus repeatable, right? 3 magic words. Repeatable is the first. The second is scalable, right? If it works in Chile, does it work in all the other Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America? Does it work for Hispanics in the United States? Does it work in Spain? Does it work when translated into Portuguese for Brazil or English for the US? In other words, is this a scalable business? And then third, in not as much of a hurry, is can I get this business to profitability? Because if you can demonstrate repeatable and scalable to an investor, they will give you the investment dollars you need to cover that gap till you get to profitability. So the last thing I would say is just a reminder. This is brutally, brutally hard work, and you cannot do it in a hurry. You need to take the time to do dozens of these face-to-face, one at a time customer interviews, not focus groups, not surveys, and you need time to allow time to change your mind and and say, well, maybe our product should do this instead of that. Maybe our product doesn't need those features at all, but it'll be much more popular if we added this suite of features, and not be in a hurry to run out there and sell, which entrepreneurs are genetically inclined to do, because that's what we love to do the most. We love to get our head beat in, and even more than that, we love getting an order. But the route to getting an order, when you move more slowly, you have a much better chance of getting more and more orders over time and building a successful company for the long term. For those of you who are tuning in or coming to the Inc. Conference in Monterrey, the Latin American Startup Conference, starting on Thursday night, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning to go there. There will be a couple of my talks live streamed if you want to hear more. There was also on udacity.com, udacity.com, a 9-part series on customer development hosted by Steve Blank. It's absolutely free, and if you are, and it is translated into Latin Spanish if it's easier for you to process 5 hours of lean startup content in Spanish. But I hope you will, if you haven't already, give serious consideration to going slower to build a great company and to letting your customers tell you what to do, because, as I said earlier, no other opinions matter. So with that, I am glad to sort of shut up and answer your questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bob. Here, I have a question from the YouTube channel. That it's this: what can you do when your customer is not that sophisticated in technology as in the US?
Well, the customer shouldn't really have to have any meaningful technology sophistication unless you're selling something highly sophisticated like enterprise software or SaaS software. I think that your job is to make the technology almost invisible to the customer and focus on the problem. The customer has a clear picture of his or her problem and a clear picture of whether you are solving that problem for them. And so you're not dummying anything down. What you're really doing is speaking a different language, right? You're speaking, so for example, if you were making exotic baked goods, you wouldn't really talk about the ingredients. You would talk about the tastes and the smells and the flavors of the thing you're baking. Nobody really cares how many drops of vanilla or lemon you put in the cake. They care about how it tastes and how it should taste, and so forth. And I think in broadest terms, that's the way you have to think about explaining your product to the customer. Customers generally think about how much money or time am I going to save or lose by using this product. And the more you can translate your value proposition into those kinds of answers, nobody really cares how many megabytes, gigahertz, nanoseconds, or those sorts of things that techies love to talk about. They care about, what's this going to do for me to save me time, make me money, make me look smarter to my customers, to my bosses. And you want to be thinking in terms of the value proposition as the user sees it, not your clock speed is 20% faster than your competition. If that doesn't have a real tangible value to the customer, it's just a statistic on a data sheet.
Well, thanks. Now we have a question from our friends that are in Valparaíso, the 5th region of Chile. They're in House Novo. Yeah, Jaime, I think you can see them. So if you can, por favor, haga la pregunta.
I'm not sure, but and if I can see them, I can't hear them. So.
Ya, lo podemos ver, pero no podemos escuchar. Pueden sacarle, a ver, déjeme ver si es que lo. Dame un segundo, por favor. ¿Aló? No se escucha.
I see microphones on the screen. That may be part of the problem.
Ya, ¿y la pueden escribir en el chat? I'm telling them if they can write it down in the chat.
Okay. What about creative industries? Well, creative industries are somewhat different because so much more of what you deliver is customized, almost user by user. My two most successful startups were both, I think, what you would call creative industries. The first was a PR and marketing communications agency, and what gave me the idea to start it was a guy who said, if you start an agency, I'll be your first client. And I already had 4 or 5 small clients. I said, gee, if I say yes to Ralph Guild, I can quit my very good job and be my own boss and start my own company. And that's what I did. And what Ralph Guild wanted was very different from what Bulova Watch Company wanted, was very different from what the next client wanted. And so you're more like a custom suit maker than a software developer in that every one of your products is somewhat different. Now that's good in some senses because you get to be more personal, more customized, and you get to know your customers much better. But the danger in a creative industry is that there's no margin improvement, right? If you're an advertising agency, the next time you sell somebody a TV commercial, it takes you the same 50 hours to produce it that it took you to produce the last one. So you don't get any real efficiency as a result. The other, so that to me is the biggest challenge. Where is the efficiency? Where is the scalability? And that's also why investors don't like creative industry kinds of businesses, whether they're web development shops or app builders or whatever, because those should be fundable basically by your first clients. In the case of my first client, this was a long time ago, 1972, he said, I'll pay you $1,500 a month. I said, wow, that's great, that's all I need. What he didn't mention is he paid his bills in about 100 days. And so I quickly learned about cash flow and challenges like that until we had time to have a conversation about, I can't wait 100 days to get paid and stay in business. And we solved it that way. But most investors don't like creative businesses because they should be able to generate their own sort of cash flow by getting customers to invest in them by prepaying for services. In my seventh and most successful business, we basically, two of us funded it out of our wallets because we knew that the contracts were going to be big enough, if we could get them, to cover all of the costs at an almost immediate profit. This was a CRM strategy company back in 1993, before there was an internet, before there was an acronym named CRM. And so we funded that, self-funded it, till we got to $50 million in revenue and obscenely high profitability. And when it was time to really scale it globally, we had no problem getting venture capital valuing the company at more than $100 million, mostly because we didn't need the money. We were using the money purely to prepare for a public offering that would have happened had the internet bubble not completely collapsed in 2000. But the investors saw the traction, saw our ability to fuel the growth on our own, but for creative businesses. In the early days in particular, it's extremely difficult to get outside investment, and finding a product that is sort of universally applicable. So the first time you do something for a client, you can do that over and over again for multiple clients, getting more efficient each time you sell the same product. And that's a tough challenge in the creative world. What's next?
Well, we have another question that is from Aldo Munoz, that is the Paraíso World in life for you. The question is that, how can you handle the competition where in the companies that are similar to your startup, once they're going out to the market and you're still in that process?
I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that.
Well, the question is that, how do you handle the competition of the similar companies as yours while you're still in processes of launching and they already are launching? How can you handle that?
Well, ideally, you can start by getting one or two or three, call them co-development early customers who are getting your services at a discount or sometimes even for free, who are actually involved in shaping the product or service so that when you launch, you already have several actual customer experiences to talk about. And so, I mean, the challenge is the longer you keep the customer away from your business, the longer it is before you have satisfied customers or customer successes to talk to the next customer about. So you've got to find those first few to sort of start learning to ride the bicycle before you're ready to ride it outside where people can see you. The challenge with established competitors in that world is that you have to do your best to keep your information and your secret sauce, your special point of difference away from them. Hard to do. So you don't want to put everything about your company on your website, for example. You want to tease people to get them to talk to you and, offline, so to speak, or asynchronously, so that you're not putting all your secrets and all your promises out there for all your competitors to see. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the ground transportation industry right now, right, everybody is trying to show how different they are from Uber and talking about everything in their sort of secret box long before they launch, usually to try to raise money. And so you have to be very careful. The way I think about it is when you show your company in the pre-launch phase, you never show everybody, or you never show anybody the entire picture of the company. For some, you talk about the front end. For others, you talk about the back end. You may do case histories in one market that's one of 6 or 7 that you're going to sell into. But you have to be careful not to let the entire picture of your company out in public view too early in the life of the company, or you are enabling your competitors to write the competitive plan to eat you alive before your baby is really even born.
Well, Bob, do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Friends, amigos de House No, ¿alguna otra pregunta que le quieran desarrollar?
No, we don't have.
Okay, there's another question here. I'm gonna read it to you. In terms of the gap between Silicon Valley, New York, Europe, and Latin America, what do you think are the Latin American advantage compared to what you guys have in the U.S. and compared to Europe that you think that we can move forward and work in that area, specific area, in terms of technology?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't even think of Europe as, please don't quote me too loud, but I don't think of Europe as particularly entrepreneurial at all. The level of entrepreneurship activity is very low. The number of unique ideas or innovative companies is quite low compared to the population. And the most important thing that I think is one of the key advantages in Latin America is the work ethic. I would guess that the average number of hours that a European entrepreneur works is roughly half that number compared to a Mexican or a Chilean or a serious Colombian entrepreneur. That drive and that passion to really do something important and to own it and to build it and make it great is a key ingredient to Latin startup success. The other, I think, is that there is an awful lot of software development talent spread throughout Latin America and sort of creative problem solvers. But the biggest weakness in my experience is in digital marketing, which is really only very, very recently begun to be taught at any decent quality level in most of the places I've traveled in Latin America. And they've been teaching that for more than a decade in Stanford and Columbia and in the bigger cities, particularly in the Valley and in New York. Lots of the rest of the United States, with a few notable exceptions, lots of the rest of the United States is still pretty, backward in terms of truly disruptive startup innovation. And the other thing that is growing at a healthy rate in Latin America is the sort of population of mentors, of successful startup people who are willing to share their wisdom, their time, their talent with the next generation of Latin entrepreneurs. And there is no substitute for having good mentors and coaches, preferably those who are willing to do it just for the good of the country, for the good of Latin entrepreneurship, not because they want some stock or they want a special deal to buy some stock or they want to be paid. There are plenty of those people too, but the ones you really want are people who believe in you, believe in what you're doing, and are willing to give you some guidance and some time to reduce the number of mistakes your startup makes on the way to being successful. So.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure, and all of the community is really happy to get this webinar with all of that experience.
It's been my pleasure to say hello to you all. I hope I'll see some of you in Monterey, or perhaps next spring in Medellin at the first Global Entrepreneurship Congress to come to Latin America in the spring of next year. So have a good entrepreneurship week and a good conference, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.